right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Matt Metler podcast. How are you guys doing? I hope everybody's well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about. First, I'm going to blow my nose. I'll be right back. Now that I've got that cleared up, I don't sound so nasally. I can tell. I can tell immediately. It's kind of ironic. For the rest of the show, I kind of wanted to do a follow-up to microphone techniques for humans. Because this is the beauty of doing videos is, man, after you do a video, you always realize that for every question you answer, you make two more questions, right? And I realized after I watched that video a couple of times and soaked in it, that the advice that I was giving was, let's call it Microphone Basics 101, right? Microphone 101. But I did realize pretty quickly I was completely leaving out a certain category of people and singers in general, right? And that is, I'm going to call them my church sisters, and that would be your black gals that have big, powerful church voices, right? Because when I talked about microphone technique, I did not include what you do when you own one of those amazing voices like that. If you happen to have one of those black girl big church voices, powerful lungs, powerful diaphragm, if you got one of those, you're going to need a little bit different microphone technique than most people, okay? Because I realized when I talked about having a microphone technique that includes holding the microphone relatively close and keeping it there. There are certain singers who, when they get powerful, when they go big, when they get loud, they back their mic off a little bit, right? They are compensating at the microphone for their change in gain. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're a girl and if you're a gal and you're in church and you're doing that because you're getting real loud and you know that it sounds better to pull that microphone back, then by all means, I don't want to try and say that anybody is wrong for doing that, right? Because there are certain gals, like when I've mixed Hazel Miller a bunch of times. She's kind of a local Denver staple around here. She's got one of those powerful black lady church voices, right? And when she steps on the gas, she has to back off the mic a little bit, because if she's right up on it, she will be red lighting my channel strip. Like all of a sudden the gain on my channel strip will just start red lighting, which is not good. In audio terms, that means, green means go, yellow means slow, red means stop, right? So if you're red lighting the channel strip, it's going into distortion and it's not going to sound good, right? Because it's an interesting thing to note about audio equipment. Pretty much every piece of audio gear was designed to make up for a shortcoming in some other piece of audio gear. I know that sounds funny, but it's kind of true. Every piece of audio gear was designed to make up for a shortcoming in some other piece of audio gear, right? So we have like the preamp on the channel. And the preamp is, generally speaking, pretty good at doing what it does, which is it pre-amplifies the signals. Pre-amplification would be taking a microphone level signal or a guitar or something like that and amplifying it up to a signal that would be appropriate now for a power amplifier. If you hook a microphone right into a power amplifier directly, will it work? Yes. The only gain control that you would have would be the gain control on the front of the amplifier, and you would have no equalization controls whatsoever. But would it work? Yes. Yes, it would. Because this is a source of output, right? And if you put it into a source of input in an amplifier will amplify it. That's exactly what it does, right? So could you plug a microphone directly into an amplifier? Sure, you could. But we usually plug it into a mixer so that we can get things like preamp, channel preamp, and things like that, right? And that's how we control the way the microphone sounds. And so if you got a great big voice, church voice, something like that, and you really stomp on the gas, you're going to red light the channel strip, right? So moving the microphone away in that case actually is the perfect thing to do. So, my sister gals that are out there in church singing, you move the mic away when you get really loud, when you really step on the gas, girl, you're doing just fine. You just keep doing what you're doing because that is exactly the perfect right technique to use, right? But for people that don't have huge voices like that, really super powerful voices, you can stay a lot closer to the microphone. You don't have to back off of it so much. You can go from here to maybe like here. That'll make a real nice difference in the amount of bigness that you get and the way that you capture the sound when you go loud, right? So I don't want to say that those techniques aren't valid, because for certain singers, those are 100% valid. And I'm also going to say this: the balance between the technique that you use like that is struck between you and your audio engineer, the equipment they have, and their skill set and skill level, right? Some audio engineers, it's like he says in Swingers, they really want to mix for you, right? But they either don't have they haven't done their homework, or they don't have enough experience, things like that. Those kind of audio engineers are not going to be able to give you the same kind of things that a full-scale audio engineer that has all of the tools at their disposal will be able to give you. Because if you're just at church and the only thing that you have is your church's sound system, and it's just a simple little sound system, and it's not like you don't have an engineer that runs it every day and things like that. Some churches are crazy. Some churches have 2 engineers. Some churches have really nice desks. Some churches do like a full-blown production every weekend for their services, right? So some churches provide those things. Some churches just have a little Mackie mixer, right? And they got a podium mic, and they got a couple mics for the choir, and they got like one for the soloist. Like in churches like that where you're not getting a whole lot of audio engineering, some of these self techniques that you can use as a singer are really well suited to situations like that. Because if you don't have somebody that's going to have a compressor in your channel and who's going to set it for your voice, well, then moving your mic away when you get loud is exactly the perfect right thing to do, right? But if you have an audio engineer who has a compressor set perfectly for your voice, who's back there monitoring it, you can sing right into the microphone, right up on it, and it's going to be just fine. The compressor is going to take the load off of the channel strip's gain, and it's going to prevent it from clipping. Clipping is when it goes into the red, right? So it's going to prevent that from happening. So I totally wanted to talk about those advanced singers that have real strong pipes, right? Because if you really step on the gas, you may need to move away from the microphone, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you've been doing that up to this point, I don't want to encourage you to not do that. But if you've got a skilled audio engineer there and they have compressors and they have things like that, talk to them. Ask them how they feel about you moving away. Because if they say, no, I got a really great compressor over here and I got it set just for you, it's no worries, don't even worry about it. You can stay pretty close or right on it, then you can feel more confident in knowing that you can just belt right into that bad boy without moving it away. And then also, for an effect, sometimes it is situationally appropriate to move the microphone away because of the characteristic of the sound that you're trying to capture with it, in addition to its volume, right? Because, I talked about when you move the microphone further away, you got to have more gain to get it. But you're compensating for the rise in volume level by moving it away. And I talked about how when the microphone, every time you half the distance, you double the volume. Every time you double the distance, you half the volume. So, and I was also realizing as I did that yesterday, or as I did that in the video before, that when I step back and I talked way back here, that is exactly a perfect example of how much the volume falls off in a microphone. You guys can still hear me, but it sounds a lot more like the room, and it sounds a lot less present. Like when I'm up close, it sounds present. And then the other thing I kind of wanted to talk about is the fact that, I was talking about pop filters, and you got a pop filter on here, you got a pop filter on here, and yet I'm still using this big black thing right here. Why am I doing that, right? Because I have so much gain in this microphone to make it sound this good at this distance. To make it sound this good at this distance, I have to have a pretty hearty amount of gain in there. And then I'm also giving it a fair amount of compression, and compression acts like a very fast automatic volume knob. It turns up the quiet parts and it turns down the loud parts, right? And so I have a compressor that's doing that as well. Although it's not doing a whole lot of compressing right now. 2. Yeah, wow. It's not actually doing a whole lot of compression, which is weird. So if you have a really skilled audio engineer that has all those tools at their disposal, you can probably sing a lot closer to the microphone than if you have a little mixer off somewhere, or you guys have a closet somewhere and nobody even sees it or knows anything about it, and you're moving your microphone away because you just know it sounds better. I don't want to mess with that. I don't want to say that that's wrong, because here's another thing too, right? I will never say that there's something that's more scientifically accurate if it doesn't sound good, right? Like it does not matter to me if you're doing something scientifically accurately or correctly from an audio perspective if it doesn't sound good. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't generally follow rules. There are rules that if you follow them, you're going to have successful outcomes, right? But I'm also not so adherent to the rules that if you're doing something by the rules but it still doesn't sound good, try something else. Do something else, right? So yeah, I think that is sort of the follow-on to microphone techniques for humans, for singers, stuff like that, right? If you're just a speaker, if you're just a vocal speaker, you're not going to have to move the microphone away because you get super loud, unless it's for effect. And then I was also thinking about, there are actually times that people hold the mic incorrectly for effect. And a really good example of that is stand-up comedians. A lot of stand-up comedians will hold the mic incorrectly to get a specific kind of effect in their microphone, to get a specific kind of sound or noise. Like I think about Fluffy. Half of his show is making sound effects into the microphone. And so he has a lot of techniques that he's developed to get those sounds to sound exactly the way he wants, right? And the other thing is, like, if you're beatboxing, like shotgunning a mic when you're beatboxing, okay, sometimes, not always, sometimes I could see that. Depends on the microphone, depends on the situation, depends on the technique, okay? So sometimes sometimes it is appropriate to hold the mic incorrectly. And a lot of times, like I said, a lot of times you'll see stand-up comedians and stuff like that hold the microphone kind of very lackadaisically with a lazy technique. But a lot of times that is for an effect. They're trying to get a particular kind of sound out of the microphone, right? All right, and then lastly, I kind of want to touch on, since I've been talking about all this microphone stuff, I wanted to talk about the real secret special, Sammy's secret special sauce in all things audio and all things audio engineering. And that is, it all starts with good gain structure. It all starts with proper, correct gain structure. It all starts with good impedance matching. Impedance matching is things that you do between equipment in the way that you hook it up. And having proper gain structure makes all the difference in the world. So that is foundation number one to getting a good sound, is proper gain structure. And that is such an extensive kind of lesson or class. I'm going to save it for another video. I'm going to do a whole entire video on gain structure, because it's the foundation of the whole thing. Everything's kind of built off of that. And once we've established that foundation, then I can kind of talk about other things from there. So with that, think that's going to go ahead and wrap up the follow-on lesson about microphones. And I wanted to say thank you guys so much for joining me here on the Matt Metler podcast. I do appreciate you, and I hope that you've enjoyed it and learned something valuable about audio. I hope that that's been a thing here tonight for you, or today, or whatever time it is that you're watching this. And until we meet again on the next one, the Matt Metler podcast is a Matt Metler production, copyright 2019.